The clinking of cutlery was the only sound in the room until my father cleared his throat. Dinner in our house was always tense, but that night felt different, like a storm waiting to break. My mother glanced nervously at him, while my younger sister picked at her food, pretending not to exist. Then it happened. My father leaned back in his chair, looked directly at me, and said in front of everyone, "You'll never succeed, not in this life." The words were sharp enough to slice through the air. My stomach tightened, my throat burned. He didn't just say it quietly, he wanted everyone to hear it. He wanted me humiliated. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother lowered her gaze, my sister froze, and my father smirked like he had just won some twisted game. I didn't answer. Not then. I simply clenched my fists under the table and made a silent promise. Tonight, I will show him who I really am. He thought I was weak. He thought I had nothing. But he had no idea what I had been working on in secret. And before the night ended, the truth would be undeniable. Let me pause for a second. You should probably know who I am before we go further. My name is Daniel Cole. I'm 24 years old, and for most of my life, I've lived under the shadow of my father's doubt. He's the kind of man who measures success only by money, status, and control. If you don't live by his definition, you're nothing. That's what he believes. That's what he's tried to drill into me since I was a kid. I wasn't the perfect son. I didn't go to law school like he wanted. I didn't take over his small business either. Instead, I chased something different, something he called a stupid dream. But what he didn't know was that I'd been grinding in silence, building something that even he couldn't ignore. I had failed plenty of times, sure. I had fallen, gotten back up, and fallen again. But tonight was different. I finally had something real to show. And when the opportunity came, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to shut him down in front of everyone at that very table. He had mocked me for the last time. That wasn't the first time my father had mocked me. In fact, I'd grown up hearing his voice tear me down more than it ever lifted me up. "You're too soft. You'll never make it. You're wasting your time." Those words had carved scars inside me. Scars no one could see, but I carried them everywhere. I used to think if I worked hard enough, he'd finally look at me with pride. But pride from him was like water in the desert, something you imagine but never touch. Still, that night, when he said those words in front of my family, something shifted. It wasn't just another insult. It was the final blow that pushed me past my breaking point. I wasn't angry, at least not only angry. I was determined. Determined to stop begging for his approval and start proving my worth on my own terms. And I already had the perfect way to do it. Because while he thought I was wasting my life, I had been quietly building something behind the scenes. Something that was about to change everything. And when I revealed it that night, the smirk on his face would finally disappear. For the past 2 years, I had been living a double life. By day, I worked part-time jobs to pay bills, delivery runs, tutoring, anything I could find. By night, though, that's when the real work happened. I had been building an app. Not just any app, but one that solved a problem most people ignored. Helping small business owners manage their inventory and finances in one simple system. It wasn't flashy, but it worked, and I knew it had potential. I poured every sleepless night, every ounce of energy, every dollar I could scrape together into making it real. No one knew, not even my mother. A week before that dinner, something incredible happened. A local startup accelerator had reviewed my app. Out of hundreds of applicants, they picked mine. I was awarded a $50,000 investment contract, plus mentorship from people my father worshipped on TV. But I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my best friend. I wanted the reveal to be unforgettable. So when my father mocked me that night, I realized fate had just set the stage. And I wasn't going to waste it. After my father's words, dinner dragged on in painful silence. I barely tasted the food. Every second, my heart pounded with the decision I had to make. Should I reveal it now or wait for the perfect moment? But as I looked around the table, I knew the answer. My mother's quiet sadness, my sister's lowered eyes, my father's smugness. I couldn't let this go on. So I leaned forward, finally breaking the silence. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice calm, "you're wrong." My father raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what makes you think so?" That was my moment, my chance to flip the script. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thick envelope I had carried with me all day, and slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked, almost mocking again. "Open it," I said. Inside that envelope was the proof. The official contract, signed and stamped, with the $50,000 deal attached. The same father who had just mocked me was now seconds away from seeing I wasn't the failure he thought I was. And I couldn't wait to watch his face change. Dad tore open the envelope with a smirk, expecting, what? Maybe a fake certificate or some desperate attempt to impress him. But the second his eyes scanned the first line, that smirk faded. His lips parted slightly. His fork, still in his hand, froze midair. $50,000 investment, he muttered under his breath, as if the words themselves were foreign. The table went dead silent. My sister's eyes widened. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment breathe. "Yes, Dad, an accelerator program. They chose my project out of hundreds. I start next week." His face went pale, then red. He looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't form the words. That silence, it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard in my life. Before Dad could say anything, my mom spoke up, her voice trembling. "Daniel, why didn't you tell us? This is incredible." My sister chimed in, almost laughing in disbelief. "Wait, so you've been building a real company this whole time?" While Dad kept saying, she cut herself off, her eyes flicking nervously at him. I nodded, "Yes, and it's just the beginning." Dad cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the table. "This doesn't mean anything yet. These things fail all the time." His words stung, but not the way they used to. This time I saw the cracks in his armor. His voice wasn't steady, it was defensive. He wasn't mocking me anymore. He was scrambling. For once, the family wasn't looking at him. They were looking at me. Of course, Dad couldn't let it go. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Do you even understand what running a business takes? Discipline, leadership, real skills, not just playing with a computer." I met his glare head on. "You're right, it takes all of that. And that's exactly why they picked me. Because I've been proving I have it even when you weren't looking." My mom whispered, "Robert," but he ignored her. "Let be real, Daniel," Dad said, his voice rising. "You've always been average. I won't let you fill this family with false hope." But his words didn't carry the same weight anymore. For the first time, I felt taller than him, stronger. Because I knew something he didn't. This wasn't just about $50,000. It was about finally standing up to the man who had kept me small all my life. Then something I never expected happened. My mother looked at me, really looked at me, with tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Daniel." Those words hit me harder than anything my father had said. She had never said that out loud before, not once. Dad snapped his head toward her. "Proud? For what? For chasing dreams instead of being realistic." But my mom didn't back down. She reached for my hand. "For working hard, for believing in yourself, for not giving up even when it was hard." My chest tightened. After years of silence, my mother was finally on my side. And the way Dad's face twisted in frustration told me everything. His control over this family was slipping. The tension was thick. For years, Dad's voice had been the loudest in the room, the one everyone bent to. But now, things had shifted. My sister finally spoke. "Honestly, Dad, Daniel's doing more than any of us thought possible. Maybe it's time you gave him some credit." Dad slammed his hand on the table. Credit for what? He hasn't proven anything yet. But his anger didn't scare me anymore. Instead, I felt a strange calm. Because I knew this was just the beginning. I had planted the seed that night, and I was about to watch it grow into something no one, especially my father, could deny. And soon, I would prove not only that I could succeed, but that I could succeed beyond his wildest imagination. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of my father's words, but because of what had just happened. For the first time in years, he wasn't the center of power. His voice hadn't drowned me out. My mom had defended me. My sister had questioned him. And me, I had finally spoken without fear. I replayed the moment over and over, Dad's face when he read the contract. The disbelief, the anger, the cracks in his perfect mask of authority. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't over. He would fight back. He always did. And if I wasn't ready, he'd crush me again. So I made a decision that night. I wouldn't just prove him wrong in words, I'd prove him wrong in action, publicly, unforgettably. Because if I was going to win this battle, I had to do more than survive. I had to shine. A week later, the accelerator program officially began. I walked into a glass building downtown, clutching my laptop and notes, surrounded by other young founders buzzing with nervous energy. We each had 5 minutes to pitch our projects to a panel of mentors, investors, executives, people who had built empires from scratch. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the stage. My palms were sweating, my heart pounding like a drum, but I remembered Dad's voice, "You'll never succeed." And something inside me hardened. I took a deep breath, smiled, and spoke. 5 minutes later, I walked off the stage to something I never expected. Applause. Real applause. The kind that fills a room and shakes your bones. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer just proving myself. I was becoming someone worth listening to. But of course, my father couldn't stand it. Word of my program spread quickly. Our town was small and news traveled fast. Soon, neighbors were congratulating my mom, people were stopping me on the street, and for once my name wasn't spoken with pity. That's when Dad started his campaign. He told anyone who would listen that my project was a scam. He whispered that I was wasting investors' money, that I was dragging the family name through the mud. I heard it all secondhand, but it stung. Worse, it made me angry. Why couldn't he just let me have this? But instead of fighting him head-on, I made a choice. I would let my success speak louder than his slander. Because one day soon, the truth would be too big for him to deny. That day came faster than I thought. After a presentation at the accelerator, one of the mentors, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, pulled me aside. "Daniel," she said, "your app isn't just good, it's necessary. I'd like to back you personally." I blinked in shock. "Back me how much?" She smiled. $250,000. With the right strategy, we can turn this into a multi-million-dollar company. My heart nearly stopped. $250,000, the kind of money my father worshipped. I shook her hand, trying to keep my cool, but inside I was screaming. That night, as I signed the paperwork, I thought about Dad's words at dinner. "You'll never succeed." Oh, he was going to eat those words very soon. 2 weeks later, the accelerator held a press event for all the startups. Cameras, reporters, the works. When it was my turn to speak, I stood under the bright lights, microphone in hand, and announced the deal with Clara. The crowd erupted, reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed. I wasn't just Daniel anymore. I was Daniel Clark, founder of a funded startup. That night, the article hit the local paper. Young entrepreneur secures $250,000 for startup. And when my father saw it the next morning, the whole neighborhood said they heard him slam the door so hard it shook the walls. Because for the first time in his life, he couldn't stop me. I should have been celebrating, but then my phone buzzed. "Daniel Clark, the voice on the other end asked. "This is Mr. Jacobs from the bank. Your father contacted us. He said you're mismanaging investor funds. We need clarification." I froze. My own father had gone that far, trying to sabotage me with lies. For a moment, panic rose in my chest. What if the bank believed him? What if Clara pulled her investment? But then I remembered something Clara had told me. In business, the truth always wins, but only if you stand firm. So I set up a meeting, walked in with every document, every signed contract, every legal paper in perfect order, and left watching their doubts crumble. That was the day I realized my father wasn't just an obstacle. He was afraid, afraid I was becoming everything he was. A few nights later, there was a knock at my apartment door. It was my mom. Her eyes were red, her coat buttoned hastily. "Daniel," she whispered, "I had to come. Your father's furious. He says you've embarrassed him, that you're ruining his reputation. He's planning something drastic." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean, drastic?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but promise me one thing, don't give up. No matter what he does, don't let him take this from you." Her words shook me. For years she had stayed silent, standing in his shadow. But now she was risking his wrath just to encourage me. I hugged her tight. "I won't, Mom, not this time." A week later, an email landed in my inbox. "Daniel Clark, we are pleased to invite you to present at the State Business Expo. Selected entrepreneurs will pitch in front of national investors, media, and CEOs." I nearly dropped my phone. This was it, the big stage, the kind of event that could launch my company nationwide. But when I told my family at Sunday dinner, Dad scoffed. "A state expo, please. They'll laugh you off the stage, and when they do, don't come crawling back here." This time, though, I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "Then I guess you'd better watch the news that night." The expo hall was massive, filled with hundreds of people, investors in tailored suits, journalists and tech founders buzzing with energy. When it was my turn, I walked onto the stage, my presentation loaded on the big screen. I glanced down and saw Clara giving me a thumbs up. My hand steadied. I launched into my pitch, telling the story of small businesses, the struggles they faced, and how my app was already saving shops thousands each month. When I finished, the silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then the room erupted into applause. But the real moment came when a man from the front row stood and said, "Daniel, I want in. $1 million today." I almost couldn't breathe. A million. I had just leapt into a world my father could never touch. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. "Young developer secures $1 million investment at State Expo." I didn't even need to call my family. My phone lit up with messages from cousins, old classmates, even neighbors I barely remembered. But the call I dreaded finally came. It was Dad. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "Daniel, we need to talk." For a moment, I thought maybe he was calling to apologize, to finally admit he was wrong. But deep down, I knew better. Because men like my father didn't say sorry. They plotted their next move. We met at a cafe near my old neighborhood. Dad was already seated, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Daniel," he began, "I'll make this simple. You can't run a company alone. You'll fail without guidance. Let me step in. I'll control the finances, the strategy, everything. With my experience, we'll avoid disaster." I stared at him, stunned. After years of calling me worthless, now he wanted control of my success. "No, Dad," I said flatly. "This is my company, my vision, my work." His face darkened. "Don't be a fool, you'll regret this." But as I looked at him, I realized the truth. This wasn't about helping me. It was about reclaiming the power he had lost. And I wasn't giving it back. 2 days later, I got a letter. It was from my father's lawyer. He was threatening to sue me, claiming I had used family resources to build my app, that I owed him part of my company. I felt sick. For a moment fear clawed at me. A lawsuit could ruin everything. Investors could panic. But then Clara stepped in. She reviewed the claim, laughed, and said, "Daniel, this is empty. He has no evidence. And when we shut this down, it'll only make you look stronger." For the first time, I saw my father's tactics clearly. They weren't strength. They were desperation. And desperation never wins. A month later, I was invited to speak at a national tech conference. Thousands of people, live coverage. As I walked on stage, I scanned the crowd and froze. In the back row, arms crossed, was my father. He had come. For a moment, old fear flickered inside me. But then I remembered who I was now. I wasn't the boy begging for approval. I was the man who had built something real. I delivered my talk with fire, telling the story of doubt, hard work, and triumph. And when the standing ovation came, I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight at him. His face was unreadable, but for the first time in my life, he wasn't towering over me. After the conference, investors flooded in. Journalists wanted interviews. My inbox exploded with opportunities. But the message that shook me most wasn't from a stranger. It was from my mom. She texted, "Your father won't say it, but he's been quieter these days. I just wanted you to know, I've never been prouder to call you my son." I sat there staring at my phone, my chest tight. For years, I thought I needed Dad's pride to survive. But in that moment, I realized something better. I had my own pride, and I had earned it. Weeks later, at another family dinner, the air was different. My sister asked questions about my company. My mom beamed when I spoke. And Dad, he sat silent, his fork clinking against the plate. Finally, he muttered, "So, what's next for your company?" It wasn't an apology, it wasn't praise, but it was something, a crack in his wall. I leaned back, smiled, and said, "What's next? Success. The kind you said I'd never have." He didn't reply, he didn't need to, because the truth was clear, I had already won. That night, as I walked out into the cool air, I whispered to myself, "I'm Daniel Clark, and I proved him wrong."